He lost everything at 21. Now he owns 3 companies. I had exactly $7,924 in my bank account and $143,000 in debt. My car was repossessed the day before. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor of my friend's apartment, and I had just turned 21. The fall from hope. In the early morning light, Jake Mercer stood outside the loading dock of Peterson's warehouse, clutching a worn application form. The same hands that had once confidently pitched investors now trembled slightly as he handed the paper to a burly supervisor. 6 months earlier, Jake had been the toast of his small entrepreneurial circle, a college dropout with a tech idea everyone thought would change the world. Now he was just another desperate guy looking for work that would pay enough to chip away at a mountain of debt. "You ever worked a forklift before?" the supervisor asked, barely glancing at the application. "No, sir, but I learn fast," Jake replied, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. The supervisor grunted. "We'll start you on boxes. $11 an hour. Be here at 5 a.m. tomorrow." As Jake walked the 3 miles back to his friend's apartment, he couldn't afford the bus fare. He reflected on the startling speed of his downfall. The trailer park where he grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, seemed like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 3 years since he'd left with dreams bigger than the rust-stained mobile homes that lined those narrow streets. His mother had cried when he told her he was dropping out of community college to pursue his startup idea. Not tears of disappointment, tears of worry. "The system isn't built for people like us to win, Jake," she had said, her hands raw from the double shifts she worked at the local diner. But Jake had been certain he would be different. His app, a platform connecting local farmers directly with restaurants, had seemed like a sure thing in an age of farm-to-table obsession. The initial angel investment had come easily, almost too easily. $250,000 in seed funding. A small office in Louisville. 3 eager friends as employees. Lessons from the warehouse floor. The first box Jake lifted at Peterson's warehouse felt like it contained all his shattered dreams. By noon, his hands were blistered, his back screaming in protest. By the end of the week, he was too exhausted to even feel the shame that had consumed him in those first days after the collapse of Farm Fresh Connect. "You're keeping up better than most college boys," remarked Hector, a 50-something veteran of the warehouse floor who had taken a curious liking to Jake. "But your mind's somewhere else. That'll get you hurt around here." Over microwaved meals during their breaks, Jake found himself sharing his story with Hector. The older man listened without judgment, occasionally nodding as Jake described the fatal flaws in his business model. The underestimated logistics costs, the farmers who weren't as tech-savvy as he'd assumed, the restaurants that were intrigued but unwilling to disrupt their established supply chains. "You know what your problem was?" Hector said one day, after Jake had finished recounting a particularly painful investor meeting. "You tried to solve a problem you didn't understand. Ever worked at a restaurant? Ever farmed a day in your life?" The simple question hit Jake like a physical blow. He hadn't done either. "I have a cousin who owns a small restaurant," Hector continued, unwrapping his sandwich. "Works 18 hours a day. Says the last thing he needed was some app making his life more complicated, even if it saved him a few dollars." That night, lying on his mattress on the floor, Jake couldn't sleep. Hector's words echoed in his mind. He had built a solution without truly understanding the problem. He had been so enamored with his own idea, so certain of his own brilliance, that he hadn't done the hard work of understanding the people he was trying to serve, the night shift of knowledge. 2 months into his warehouse job, Jake established a routine. Work from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., shower, nap for 2 hours. Then, from 5 p.m. until midnight, he would be at the public library, devouring everything he could about business failures, supply chain management, and the restaurant industry. The library became his sanctuary and salvation. While his former classmates were posting vacation photos on Instagram, Jake was filling notebooks with observations and ideas. He started a blog anonymously documenting what he was learning from his spectacular failure. "Failure isn't just an event," he wrote one night. "It's a perspective, and I'm beginning to see that my so-called failure might be the best education I never paid for." To his surprise, the blog began attracting readers. Not thousands, but a dedicated 100 or so who commented and shared their own stories of business collapses and resurrections. Among them was a restaurant owner from Chicago who had particular praise for Jake's detailed breakdown of why tech solutions often failed in the traditional food service industry. "You get it," the restaurant owner commented. "Most tech guys think we're dinosaurs who need to be disrupted. But we're not against technology. We're against technology that doesn't actually solve our real problems." The comment sparked something in Jake. Late that night, he started a new notebook, titling it Real Problems. In it, he began listing all the complaints and frustrations he heard from Hector's cousin and the restaurant owners who commented on his blog. The pivot. Almost a year to the day after starting at the warehouse, Jake had his first day off in months. He spent it in a coffee shop, nervously waiting to meet with Rachel Lynn, the Chicago restaurant owner who had become his most engaged blog reader. "I've got to be honest," Rachel said after they'd exchanged pleasantries. "I expected someone older. Your analysis of restaurant pain points is incredibly mature." Jake smiled ruefully. "Nothing ages you quite like losing other people's money." Over the next 3 hours, Rachel shared her 20 years of restaurant experience, confirming many of Jake's theories, but challenging others. The main issue, she explained, wasn't connecting restaurants with farmers. Plenty of services already did that, including traditional food distributors who were adapting to the farm-to-table trend. "The real problem," Rachel said, tapping Jake's notebook emphatically, "is inventory management. Do you know how much food the average restaurant wastes? Between 4 to 10% of purchases before they even reach a customer's plate. That's profit in the garbage." Jake thought of the warehouse, how meticulously inventory was tracked, how much emphasis was placed on efficient stocking and picking. He thought of the restaurant kitchens he'd researched, often still using paper lists and mental calculations for ordering. "What if," he said slowly, the idea forming as he spoke, "there was a simple system that could track inventory in real time, predict usage based on reservation data and weather forecasts, and automatically suggest optimal ordering quantities?" Rachel's eyes lit up. "Now that's something I would pay for. Starting from the bottom, really." The next day, Jake gave his 2 weeks' notice at the warehouse. Hector seemed unsurprised. "I figured you weren't long for this place," the older man said. "You've got that look in your eye again. Just promise me you'll remember what you learned here." Jake nodded solemnly. "I won't forget." With $3,200 saved from his warehouse job and a clearer vision than he'd ever had before, Jake moved into the cheapest apartment he could find. Unlike his first startup, this time he didn't rush to seek investors. Instead, he spent his days working as a busboy at a local restaurant that had agreed to let him observe their inventory process, and his nights coding a prototype of what would become Stockwise. The first version was crude but functional. Jake convinced the restaurant owner to try it for free, installing it on a tablet in the kitchen. After 2 months, the owner reported a 6% reduction in food waste and eagerly asked how much it would cost to keep using the system. Jake had learned his lesson about scaling too quickly. He signed up just 2 more local restaurants, refining the system based on their feedback. He lived on ramen and worked until his eyes burned. But this time, the foundation was solid. He understood the problem because he had immersed himself in it. The unexpected mentor. 6 months into developing stock